There's something powerful about a man who doesn't rush to impress, who doesn't throw compliments or chase validation, but simply looks into a woman's eyes and asks the kind of question that makes her forget the world around her. Most men talk to be liked, but a rare kind of man speaks to be remembered. He doesn't flood her phone with, "Good morning," "Beautiful." He drops one question that keeps her awake at night, replaying his words in her mind, wondering, "Why can't I stop thinking about him?" You see, women don't fall for words. They fall for presence, for the man who sees beyond the surface, who makes them feel understood without trying to impress. Because when a man asks the right question, he doesn't chase her attention. He owns her imagination. Seneca once said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." That's not just about pain, it's about desire. If you can live inside her imagination, brother, you'll never need to chase her again. In this video, I'll give you 10 questions that bypass her defenses, ignite her emotions, and make her think about you long after the conversation ends. Not pickup lines, not manipulation, but Stoic strategy. Because when your words carry weight, you don't just talk to her, you live in her mind. Every man talks, few ask. And that, brother, is where everything changes. Most men spend their energy trying to be interesting. They talk about their job, their car, their goals. They compete through stories, trying to win attention. But the truth, the man who asks the right question owns the room, because while others talk to impress, he listens to understand. Women can feel this difference instantly. A man who talks about himself radiates insecurity. A man who asks with calm curiosity radiates control. And in that silence between her answer and your next question, that's where attraction begins to breathe. You see, when you ask a woman something deeper than the surface, you don't just get information, you create connection. And connection is magnetic. Marcus Aurelius once said, "To understand the true quality of people, you must look into their minds. Examine their pursuits." That's exactly what these questions do. They're not tricks. They're mirrors showing you what kind of woman you're dealing with, and showing her that you're not like the others. Because here's the secret. A man who can make a woman think will always outshine a man who only makes her laugh. Laughter fades, but the memory of being understood never leaves. When you ask the right kind of question, you bypass her filters, the ones she built after years of being pursued by men who only saw her beauty, not her soul. You cut through her ego, her act, her guard, and for a brief moment, she feels something rare, safety, not because you gave her validation, but because your presence allowed her truth to come forward. Think about it. When was the last time someone asked you a question that made you stop and think? It lingers, doesn't it? Because good questions aren't conversations, they're imprints. They plant something inside the mind that grows in silence. That's exactly what you want to create. A seed of curiosity. A question that replays in her thoughts when you're not there. That's what makes you unforgettable. But here's the thing, you can't fake this. You can't memorize a list of questions and expect results. It's not the words that hold power, it's the energy behind them. If you ask out of neediness, she'll feel it. If you ask out of genuine interest, she'll lean in. because authenticity is a frequency she can't ignore. That's why Stoicism matters here. A Stoic man doesn't ask to impress, he asks to understand. He doesn't fill silence with noise. He lets the silence speak for him. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Let your words be few and simple," he wasn't just giving advice on speech. He was teaching the art of presence. Every word you speak, every question you ask, should carry the weight of calm authority. You're not a boy fishing for attention. You're a man who already has direction. Let me tell you something powerful. When you learn to ask from stillness, women sense it like an instinct. It's not just the question, it's the feeling behind it. The tone that says, "I'm not here to impress you. I'm here to understand," what most men are too afraid to ask. That's when her walls lower. That's when her voice softens. That's when she starts to reveal not just words, but emotions, the real, unfiltered part of her that she hides from the world. And once you reach that point, she'll never forget you. Because in a world full of noise, you became silence. In a world full of men chasing, you became stillness. And stillness, brother, that's magnetic. Women remember men who ask questions that make them feel seen, not because those men are smooth, but because they made her feel something she didn't even know she was craving. Depth. Seneca wrote, "We learn more by asking the right questions than by giving the right answers." That's not just philosophy, it's game. Real game. Because attraction isn't built through talking, it's built through discovery. Each question you ask should serve one purpose: to reveal something about her soul, not her surface. Don't ask what she does for work. Ask what makes her feel alive. Don't ask what kind of man she wants. Ask what kind of woman she's trying to become. Don't ask if she misses you. Ask what she misses about herself when she's with you. That's how you go from ordinary to unforgettable. When you ask deeply, she starts to realize, this man isn't trying to get inside my body. He's already inside my mind. And once you're there, you don't need to chase. You just let her come to you, drawn not by your words, but by the echo of your presence. Because a question, when asked by the right man, isn't just curiosity. It's command. It's calm dominance. It's the invisible thread that ties her thoughts to yours. So remember this: when you speak, speak with purpose. When you ask, ask with power. And when you listen, listen like a man who's already whole. Because in the end, it's not your looks, your money, or your charm that she'll remember. It's the way your questions made her feel seen in a world that never really looks. That's the art of asking. And once you master it, you'll never need to chase again. There's a moment in every conversation where something shifts. You see it in her eyes that flicker between curiosity and vulnerability. It happens when a man stops trying to impress and starts asking the kind of question that touches her truth. Most men never get there. They dance on the surface, talking about food, movies, or travel. They keep things light because they're afraid of silence, afraid of depth, afraid that if they go too far, they'll scare her away. But the truth is this: you don't scare her with depth. You awaken her with it. Every woman carries an inner world no one sees. Dreams she buried, fears she hides, memories she guards like fragile glass. And when a man creates the space for her to share that world without judgment, without agenda, he becomes unforgettable. That's what I call the emotional door. It's the invisible gateway between small talk and soul talk, and only a calm, grounded man knows how to open it. The first question that unlocks it is simple, but powerful. What's something you've never told anyone, but secretly wish someone would ask you about? Read that again. This question doesn't attack, it invites. It doesn't demand vulnerability. It offers permission, because deep down, every woman, no matter how strong, confident, or guarded, wants to be understood without having to explain herself. And this question does exactly that. It says, I see you, not the mask, not the performance you. Let me tell you something. Women don't crave perfection in a man. They crave safety in his presence. And the man who can hold space for her truth without flinching becomes the man her mind keeps returning to. Think about this. When you ask her that question, she doesn't answer with her mind, she answers with her heart. She'll pause, look away for a second. You might see her exhale, almost like she's releasing something she's been carrying too long. And when she finally speaks, it's not rehearsed. It's real. It's the version of her that the world rarely sees. You don't interrupt. You don't rush. You listen not to reply, but to understand, because that silence between her words, that's where trust is born. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Be tolerant with others and strict with yourself." That's your rule here. You don't judge her answer. You don't make it about you. You receive it with strength, because the way you handle her truth determines how much of it she'll ever give you again. Psychology calls this the disclosure intimacy effect. It means when someone reveals something personal, the emotional bond multiplies. The more she tells you, the more she feels connected, not because you manipulated her, but because she chose to trust you. And choice is the root of attraction. When she chooses to open up to you, even just a little, she invests emotionally. That's not something she can undo with logic. Let me show you how this plays out. Imagine you're sitting across from her at a quiet cafe. The world outside is busy, chaotic, but in this moment, it's just the two of you. You lean back, calm, unhurried, and ask, what's something you've never told anyone, but wish someone would? She laughs nervously at first, tries to deflect with humor, but your steady eyes, your stillness, your composure, they tell her you're not playing, that you're here, fully. And then, the walls begin to lower. She starts talking about something small, a childhood dream, a regret, a fear, and as she speaks, her tone changes, her body relaxes, her voice softens, because for the first time, she's not performing, she's sharing. At that moment, you've crossed the invisible line that most men never reach. You've gone from being a man she's talking to a man she feels connected to. And the key wasn't charm. It wasn't compliments. It was presence. Let me be clear, this is not manipulation. It's leadership. A Stoic man doesn't force emotion, he creates space for it. He doesn't rush to comfort, he listens with strength. Because real power isn't in making her talk, it's in holding her truth without fear. When she finishes, you don't analyze or fix it. You simply nod, hold her gaze, and say something like, "Thank you for trusting me with that." That's it. No overreaction, no validation seeking, just quiet, respect. Because silence, when rooted in confidence, is more seductive than any clever reply. Seneca wrote, "It is a rough road that leads to the heights of greatness." This applies to conversation too. Most men stay at the bottom, shallow talks, predictable lines, emotional safety. But the man who dares to ask, who dares to listen, who dares to feel without losing control, he ascends, and the woman feels it, not just in her mind, but in her body. Something about your calm presence stirs her deeper instincts. She feels grounded around you, yet intrigued. Because stillness in a man creates motion in a woman. That's the paradox. The calmer you are, the more she feels. So remember this, brother. Every man can ask a question, but only a few can create a moment. And it's the moment that lingers, not the words. When you ask her something real, she might forget your name, your face, your cologne, but she'll remember how she felt in that pause, seen, safe, and alive. That's how you open the emotional door. Not with pressure, not with promises, but with calm curiosity and courage, because in that doorway, attraction isn't about what she feels for you, it's about what she feels with you. And that, brother, is the kind of feeling that never fades. Attraction isn't built in safe conversations. It's not born in the small talk about favorite foods, weekend plans, or the same recycled questions she's heard 100 times. Real attraction is forged in the moments when you awaken a woman's soul, when you remind her of the fire she once felt and make her experience it again in your presence. This is why questions about passion and aliveness are so powerful. They don't just ask about her day. They ask about her life. They don't make her describe herself. They make her feel herself. And once you become the man who ties your presence to her deepest emotions, you don't just catch her attention, you live inside her imagination. 1. Why aliveness is the secret to unforgettable attraction. Most women live in patterns: work, school, social media, routines, obligations. Life becomes predictable. And predictability, though safe, is the death of desire. But every woman carries memories of times she felt truly alive. A night when she laughed until her ribs hurt. A trip where she stood on the edge of something terrifying and thrilling. A fleeting moment when her heart raced, her blood surged, and her spirit felt limitless. When you ask her, when was the last time you felt truly alive? You're not just making small talk. You're inviting her back into that memory. You're taking her out of the mundane and dropping her into the fire of her own soul. And here's the psychological law: the brain always associates the feeling with the person who sparked it. If she remembers what it's like to feel alive while talking to you, then she will unconsciously attach that aliveness to you. That's why these questions are magnetic. They bypass logic and touch her emotions. And emotions, not logic, are what create desire. 2. A real-world example. The man who sparked adventure, take Paul. 47. For years, he thought younger women weren't interested in men like him. He assumed he had to impress them with financial stability, good restaurants, or endless compliments. But one night, he asked a simple question over drinks. "What's the craziest thing you've ever dreamed of doing?" She laughed, rolled her eyes, then admitted she always wanted to skydive, but was too afraid. Paul didn't try to soothe her or pivot to something safe. He leaned in and said, calmly but firmly, "I'll do it with you." That moment shifted everything. She no longer saw him as the older man trying to keep up. She saw him as the man who could lead her into adventure, the man who embodied freedom, the man who stood for life beyond fear. And from that night on, he wasn't forgettable. He was unforgettable because he was now tied to her wildest dream. 3. The psychology of aliveness. This works because of a principle called state transfer. Humans attach emotions to the people who cause them. If she feels alive in your presence, she'll want more of you. If she feels bored, anxious, or drained, she'll want less. It's that simple. By asking her about moments of aliveness, you're giving her brain the chance to relive those sensations, and by extension, giving her a reason to tie those sensations to you. You don't have to be flashy. You don't need to prove you're adventurous. You just need to ask questions that make her feel alive in your company. Epictetus once said, "It is not things themselves that disturb us, but our opinions about them." The same is true of desire. It's not reality that fuels her attraction, it's the way she feels in your presence. If you can awaken possibility in her mind, you instantly separate yourself from the men who drown her in cliches. 4. The difference between safe and unforgettable. Most men play it safe. So, what do you like to do on weekends? Do you watch Netflix? What's your favorite kind of food? These are forgettable. They're fine, but they don't touch her soul. They don't stir her emotions. Now imagine asking instead, when was the last time you felt truly alive? What's the wildest dream you've ever wanted to chase? She pauses. She thinks. She relives it. And in that pause, you've created something most men never give her: a moment of depth, a moment of fire, a moment of herself she almost forgot. And in her mind, you become forever linked to that feeling. 5. The mindset shift for men. Here's the truth. Most men try to be interesting by talking about themselves. They brag about achievements, money, travels, workouts, or status. They think if they shine bright enough, she'll notice. But women don't remember the man who shows off. They remember the man who shows them themselves. Your power is not in proving you're impressive. Your power is in being the mirror that reflects her most alive, most passionate self. That's the man she'll never forget. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "A man's worth is no greater than the worth of his ambitions." When you ask her about her ambitions, her wildest dreams, her craziest ideas, you're not just making conversation, you're expanding her world. And the man who expands her world becomes the man she longs to be around. Passion and aliveness are the hidden fire every woman longs for. They may bury it under routine, hide it behind responsibilities, or mute it with distractions, but the fire is always there. When you ask the questions that bring that fire back, you don't just become another man she talks to. You become the man she ties to her most powerful emotions. You become the spark, the reminder, the trigger. And while every other man is asking about her weekend plans, you're the man who makes her remember what it feels like to truly live. That, brother, is how you stop being ordinary and start being unforgettable. Attraction isn't just about chemistry. It's about alignment. Looks may turn heads. Humor may spark interest. But what makes a woman stay, what makes her respect you and remember you, is the sense that you stand for something. Women aren't drawn to men who live without standards. They're drawn to men who live by them. Because a man without values is a man without gravity. He drifts, bends, conforms. But a man with direction, principles, and vision, he becomes a force. Why values matter more than charm. Most men think they'll win a woman's heart by being agreeable, by nodding at everything she says, by showing they can adapt to her. But here's the paradox. The more you bend, the less she respects you. Women don't crave men who fold to their every desire. They crave men who hold their ground. When you ask a question like, who inspires you the most? And why? What do you value most in a man? You're not just making conversation. You're revealing something deeper, that you care about values. Not just surface attraction. You're inviting her to expose the compass inside her, and in doing so, you show her yours. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If a man knows not which port he sails, no wind is favorable." A man with no direction can't lead himself, much less inspire a woman to follow. But a man with clarity, his very presence demands attention. 2. The psychology of value projection. There's a powerful principle in psychology called value projection. It means that when a woman speaks about the qualities she admires: strength, honesty, courage, consistency, her mind naturally associates those qualities with the man who invited her to speak them out loud. Imagine this. You ask her, "What do you value most in a man?" She thinks. She pauses. She says, "A man who keeps his word." By simply listening with calm composure, you've positioned yourself as that man in her subconscious. You didn't brag. You didn't sell yourself. You simply asked the question and let her paint you with the very colors she respects. That's the subtle power most men overlook. Attraction isn't about selling. It's about framing. When she articulates her values in your presence, she begins to see you as the embodiment of them. 3. Real-world example clarity creates respect. Patrick, 54, once dated women who had endless options. At first, he tried to stand out with compliments and gifts. Nothing worked. Then one day over coffee, he asked a younger woman, "What do you value most in a man?" She put down her phone, thought for a moment, and replied, "A man who keeps his word." Patrick didn't rush to prove himself. He didn't say, "That's me. I'm reliable." He just nodded and replied, "Good. That's rare." And in that instant, her perception shifted. Because he wasn't performing for her approval. He was standing in his frame, affirming what mattered, without trying to convince her. That quiet authority made her see him differently, not as one of many, but as a man who already embodied what she admired. 4. Values create gravity. Here's the truth. Women test men constantly, not because they're cruel, but because they want to know if you're solid. Do you bend? Do you break? Or do you stand firm when you reveal your direction? You stop being a man orbiting her world. You become the center of your own. And paradoxically, that gravity pulls her closer. She doesn't want to lead you. She wants to join you. She wants to feel that if she walks beside you, she's part of something bigger than herself. And that can only happen if you have values, if you live with vision. 5. The Stoic foundation. The Stoics were clear about this virtue is the highest good, not wealth, not charm, not beauty, virtue. Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." When you embody that truth, you don't have to talk her into respecting you. She feels it. She senses it. A woman can tell instantly if a man's words are hollow or if they're backed by the weight of lived principle. And when she feels that gravity, she doesn't just admire you, she wants to be part of your path. When you ask about values, you're not digging for compliments. You're shining a light on what matters most to her and to you. And here's the paradox. The man who seeks approval loses it. But the man who stands rooted in his own principles gains it without asking. So remember this when she senses your direction. She doesn't want to change it. She wants to walk with you. Because in a world full of men chasing validation, the man with values and vision becomes the one she cannot forget. Every woman has fears. Every woman carries wounds. She doesn't show the world. She hides them behind smiles, filters, ambition, or sarcasm. But beneath the mask, there's always a place where she's afraid to go, and most men never dare to touch it. Yet this is where real connection lives, because the man who can sit with her fears, who can listen without judgment, who can remain unshaken when she exposes her vulnerabilities, that man becomes unforgettable. 1. Why fear is the doorway to trust. Most men avoid conversations about fear. They think it's too heavy, too risky, too vulnerable. So they stay on the surface work. Hobbies, weekend plans. But surface talk never builds intimacy. It never touches the heart. When you ask a question like, "What scares you the most about love? If you could relive one moment in your life, what would it be?" You're not trying to impress her. You're handing her a key to unlock the place inside her that she rarely shares. And when she uses that key with you, a bond forms, one that is far stronger than compliments or charm could ever create. Epictetus said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." When you invite her to speak her fears, you help her see that truth. You become not just a man she flirts with, but a man who helps her confront herself. 2. The psychology of fear-based bonding. There's a psychological principle called fear-based bonding. It means that when people reveal their fears, they subconsciously attach themselves to the person who received those fears without judgment. Think of trauma bonds. How two people who share their wounds often form the strongest attachments. Here, you're creating a conscious version of that bond, not through manipulation, not through pity, but through presence. If she tells you she's afraid of losing herself in love, or of giving too much and getting nothing back, and you don't flinch, you don't judge, you don't rush to fix, you just listen, then you become the rare man she can actually trust. 3. Example: the man who didn't flinch. Stephen Usher once sat across from a woman at dinner. In the past, he would have kept things light, cracking jokes to avoid uncomfortable silence. But that night, he simply asked, "What scares you the most about love?" She laughed nervously, then admitted, "I'm scared of losing myself, of pouring everything into someone who won't give it back." Stephen didn't interrupt. He didn't try to convince her she'd never lose herself with him. He just looked at her calmly and said, "That's real, and it makes sense." For the next hour, she shared stories she'd never spoken aloud. By the end of the night, she wasn't just attracted to him, she was invested, because he had touched the scar tissue of her heart and proved he could hold it without breaking. 4. Vulnerability doesn't weaken you, it strengthens you. Here's what most men get wrong. They think listening to vulnerability means giving up their strength. But it's the opposite. A weak man gets uncomfortable and rushes to change the subject. A strong man can hold the silence, hold the weight, and still remain centered. Women respect men who don't crumble in the face of fear, not their own fear, and not hers. When she sees you can sit with her darkest truths without panicking, she feels safer with you than with any man who drowns her in empty reassurance. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." When you model that strength in front of her, you invite her to rise to the same level. That's unforgettable. 5. The subtle trap to avoid. But beware, not every woman who shares fears is seeking depth. Some will test you by using vulnerability as bait, dropping hints of insecurity to see if you'll rush to rescue them. If you take the bait and play savior, you lose respect. The key is balance. Listen deeply. Acknowledge her truth. But don't collapse into over-validation. You're not there to fix her. You're there to stand with her. Your role is presence, not rescue. That difference is what separates men who get trapped in emotional chaos from men who earn lasting respect. Fear and vulnerability are the hidden gates to a woman's heart. Most men never open them. They stay in the shallow end, hoping safety will earn affection. But safety without depth is forgettable. The man who dares to ask, "What scares you about love?" The man who listens without judgment, who doesn't rush to fix, who simply holds steady, that man becomes more than attractive. He becomes trusted. He becomes rare. And in a world where everyone hides behind masks, the man who can sit with her fear without breaking becomes the man she never forgets. Every woman, whether she admits it out loud or not, longs for her life to mean something. She wants her story to matter. She wants to know she's not just drifting through time, that her existence will echo in memory, in impact, in love. And most men miss this completely. They stay trapped in small talk, surface-level flirting, or endless validation. They never dare to ask the question that pierces straight into her soul. What kind of story do you want your life to tell? This isn't just a question. It's a mirror. It forces her to pause, to reflect, to confront her deepest desires and fears. And the man who asks it, he becomes more than a date. He becomes a chapter in her story, one she'll never erase. 1. Why stories shape attraction. Humans are narrative creatures. We don't just live events, we interpret them as stories. Every memory, every dream, every heartbreak gets woven into a narrative about who we are. When you ask a woman about her story, you're not making conversation. You're inviting her to step into authorship, to declare what kind of life she wants to write. And when you're the man who gave her that invitation, she unconsciously links you to her higher destiny. Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." The man who asks her about her story isn't just looking for entertainment. He's showing that he lives as an author of his own legacy and that she can join a narrative larger than herself. 2. The power of legacy framing. When you frame life as a story, you elevate the conversation. Instead of being just another man trying to win her attention, you position yourself as the man who awakens her vision. This is called legacy framing. Psychologically, when someone imagines their future in story form, they become emotionally bonded to the person who helped them access that vision. You're no longer competing with men who talk about Netflix or vacations. You've carved your place in her imagination as the man who expands her world. And once you live in her imagination, brother, you live in her desire. 3. Example, Anthony and the turning point. Anthony, Wu Shizi, had been on his 3rd date with a younger woman. She had options. She was seeing other men casually. But over dinner, he leaned in and asked, "What kind of story do you want your life to tell?" She stopped. For a moment, she went completely silent. Then, softly, she said, "I want to be remembered as someone who lived bravely." That night, everything changed. She no longer looked at Anthony as just another man. She looked at him as the one who dared to touch her soul. Because in that moment, he wasn't competing for her time, he was inviting her into her own destiny. 4. The psychology of story-driven bonding. There's a reason this works so powerfully. Psychology calls it narrative identity. The idea that we define ourselves not by isolated events, but by the story we tell about those events. When you ask her to articulate that story, you force her to confront her own identity. And when she shares it with you, you become part of that identity. It's why people remember the person who asked them about their dreams more vividly than the one who complimented their looks. Compliments fade. Stories stay. 5. How to embody the storyteller's role. But here's the key. You can't just ask the question and walk away. You must embody it. That means living as a man with his own story, his own mission, his own legacy in progress. If you ask her about her story but your life has no direction, no mission, no greater arc, the question rings hollow. She may open up, but she won't tie her vision to you. But if you live with momentum, with clarity, with a sense of destiny, then your question becomes an invitation. Will your story join mine? And that is magnetic. 6. The subtle trap to avoid. Don't mistake this for a manipulative tactic. Some men will hear this and think, if I ask about her dreams, she'll fall for me. That's not how it works. The power of this question lies not in the words, but in the frame. If you're needy, if you're using it to impress her, it loses power. But if you ask it from a place of calm authority, genuinely curious, genuinely grounded, it strikes like lightning. 7. Why this separates boys from men. Any boy can flirt. Any boy can shower a woman with compliments. But a man challenges her soul. He reminds her that life is short, that every day is writing a line in her story, and that she has the power to choose what that story becomes. And when she feels that truth in your presence, she begins to imagine a life with you, not as a series of dates, but as part of a shared legacy. Brother, here's the truth. Attraction isn't just about chemistry. It's about destiny. The man who asks her about her story becomes the man she ties her future to. When you look at her and ask, what kind of story do you want your life to tell you? Stop being just another man in her inbox. You become the man who awakened her soul. And once you live in her story, you don't just win her attention for a night. You carve your place in her memory forever. Most men spend their lives chasing attention, chasing approval, chasing validation. They talk too much, explain too much, reveal too much. They use words like weapons, hoping to force attraction. But in reality, they weaken themselves with every attempt. But a Stoic man understands a deeper truth. Strength doesn't shout. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't explain itself. Real strength is silent. It's steady. It's immovable. And that silence, when paired with the right question, becomes a force that can unravel any woman's defenses. This is the Stoic frame. It is not about the words you use, but the energy you carry when you use them. It's not about trying to be remembered, but about embodying a presence that can't be forgotten. 1. Don't ask to impress. Ask to understand. Most men ask questions because they want to look interesting. They want her to think, wow, he's so deep, he's so different. But here's the problem. The moment your question becomes about you, it loses its power. A real man doesn't ask to impress. He asks to understand. He asks because he is grounded enough not to need validation. His curiosity is calm, not needy. And because his question is pure, it penetrates deeper. It forces her to reveal a truth, not because you demanded it, but because you allowed it. Impression fades. Understanding lingers. A man who asks to be liked will always be forgotten. But a man who asks because he seeks truth will never leave her mind. 2. Let your silence do the work. There is one thing most men fear more than rejection: silence. They can't stand stillness. They rush to fill every pause, every quiet moment, with words, with jokes, with reassurance. And in doing so, they destroy their own presence. But silence is not empty. It is a weapon. It is a mirror. In psychology, silence creates what's known as cognitive tension. The human brain cannot tolerate an unfinished loop. When you ask a question and then go silent, you create that loop in her mind. She feels the pull to answer. to fill the void, to reveal something deeper than she planned. And in that moment, you are no longer just a man she's speaking to. You are the man who pulled words out of her that no one else ever could. 3. Strength is calm in the face of emotion. Weak men lose themselves in beauty. They get flustered when she's attractive, defensive when she's distant, angry when she tests them. Their emotions betray them. But the Stoic frame is unshaken. You don't raise your voice. You don't explain yourself. You don't try to prove a thing. You ask with calm authority, and you let her emotions play themselves out while you remain centered. This doesn't make you cold, it makes you magnetic. Because nothing makes a woman feel more secure than a man who cannot be rattled. And nothing makes her more curious than a man who can see through her storms without being swept away by them. 4. Silence is the language of strength. The Stoics understood this centuries ago. Marcus Aurelius wrote about stillness. Epictetus taught that power lies not in what happens outside us, but in how we govern ourselves. And Seneca reminded us that words are cheap character, is not. Silence is not weakness. It's not avoidance. It's mastery. When you can sit in silence without fear, when you can hold a question in the air and let her reveal herself at her own pace, you show her something rare,